let's dive right in. Today we're tackling a question that seems simple, but is absolutely massive in the business world. Where does a company actually live for tax purposes? And I'll tell you right now, it's not about its mailing address, and it's definitely not as easy as just looking at a map. So let's go find the answer.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get our heads around the main idea, what we call the brain rule. Then we're going to get practical and figure out how to actually find this brain. After that, there's a weird but super important detail called the sticky rule. And finally, we'll connect all the dots and see why any of this actually matters.
Okay, first up, the brain rule. This is really the most important concept to get because it flips everything you probably assume about a company's location completely upside down.
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, for a person, right, you just count how many days they're in a country. It's simple math. But a company isn't a person. It doesn't fly in a plane or sleep in a bed. So how on earth do you count its days?
Exactly. And the answer is, you don't. For companies, you can just throw the calendar right out the window. It's not about time, it's about power. We look for this thing called management and control. In other words, we couldn't care less about where the work gets done. We only care about where the big strategic decisions are being made.
And honestly, the best way to get this is to use an analogy. Just think of a company as having a brain and a body.
So the company's body, its factories, its stores, its employees, that stuff can be scattered all over the globe. But for tax, the company only lives in one place, the single location where its brain is. It's all about finding that one room where the high-level, game-changing decisions are happening. So if the whole game is to find the brain, what are we actually looking for on the ground? Well, this is where that legal term, management and control, comes into play. It's the official treasure map to finding that brain.
Now, it sounds all formal and complicated, but most of the time, it's incredibly practical. Management and control is simply the physical place where the board of directors sits down in a room together to make the company's biggest decisions. That's it. It's all about the location of those key meetings.
Okay, wait. So just to be 100% clear, it's not the address on their official paperwork, and it's not where their biggest factory is churning out products? That's exactly right. And that's the trap so many people fall into. The brain is not where the company was registered. It's not where the day-to-day operations are. And it's not even where the owners or the shareholders happen to live. It is only about where those directors meet to steer the ship.
And to really nail this down, the tax law looks at this in three main situations. We've got your classic family business, then your standard trading company, and finally, the investment company. Let's walk through each one. First up, a very specific structure, the Hindu joint family. Let's imagine the Gupta family business. Here, the rule is really straightforward. The business is resident wherever the head of the family, called the Karta, lives and calls the shots. In this case, the brain is literally the head of the family. Okay, that makes sense for a family business, but what about just a regular company? One that makes shoes or something.
A perfect example. Let's meet Shoemaker SDN BHD. Its body, the factory, all the machinery, all the workers, is right here in Selangor, Malaysia, but its brain, where the directors fly in for all their important board meetings, is in Bangkok, Thailand. And because the brain is in Thailand, Shoemaker is considered non-resident in Malaysia, even though its entire physical operation is here.
And our last case is an investment company. Let's call it Rich Holdings SDN BYD. Now this company is different, right? It doesn't have a factory or a shop. It has no physical body, but the principle is exactly the same. We just have to find where the directors meet to manage its affairs, which for them means making big investment decisions. The location of that meeting is the location of the brain. Simple as that. Okay, so we know how to find the brain. Seems pretty clear, right? Well, there's a twist. A really important one that you have to know about. We call it the sticky rule. And it's all about what happens after a company is found to be a resident.
Now, this right here is the actual wording from the law. I know it's a bit heavy, but stick with me. It basically says that once you're considered resident for 1 year, you are presumed to be resident for every single year after that, unless you can prove you're not.
Okay, yeah, my eyes definitely glazed over a little bit with that legal jargon. Is there a simpler way to think about that?
Oh, for sure. The absolute best way to think about it is like a gym membership. The kind that auto-renews? You sign up once, and then they just keep charging your card every single year without asking.
So, here's the bottom line. Once a company's brain is in Malaysia for just 1 year, the tax authorities assume it's still here the next year, and the year after that, and so on. To cancel that membership, the company can't just quietly move its board meetings. It has to actively go to the tax authorities and prove that its brain has permanently moved somewhere else. The burden of proof is entirely on the company.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most important section. We've spent all this time finding brains and talking about sticky rules. But why? Why does any of this actually matter in the real world? What's the so what?
Yeah, what is the big deal? Why would a company care so much if it's called a resident or a non-resident?
Oh, it is a huge deal. The easiest way to think about it is this. A resident company gets treated like a VIP member of a club. A non-resident company, it's just a guest or a visitor. And as we all know, VIPs get all the perks.
And here are the two big wins for being a VIP. First, resident companies get access to the entire goodie bag of government tax incentives, things like pioneer status that can literally save them millions in taxes. Second, it's about trust. The taxman trusts resident companies to pay their taxes later, but for non-residents, they often have to have tax deducted right up front, just in case.
Okay, the VIP perks make total sense. But that brings up the million-dollar question for me. If a company is a VIP member in Malaysia, does that mean it has to pay Malaysian tax on all its income from everywhere in the world?
That is an excellent question, and it's one that trips a lot of people up. You'd think the answer would be yes, right? But believe it or not, for most companies, the answer is no. Thanks to a special tax exemption, if your typical resident company, let's say our furniture shop, earns money overseas, that foreign income is generally not taxed here in Malaysia.
But, and you need to listen very carefully to this because it's probably the most critical point of our whole discussion, there is a massive, game-changing exception to that rule.
There's a special class of VIPs whose membership has different terms and conditions. If your company operates in one of these 4 specific industries, banking, insurance, sea transport, or air transport, it's a whole different ballgame. These companies are taxed on a world scope basis. And that means every single dollar they earn, anywhere on the planet, is subject to Malaysian income tax. For these 4, the foreign income exemption does not exist.
So that wraps it up. We've seen that a company's tax home has nothing to do with its body, but everything to do with its brain, wherever its directors physically meet to make the big calls. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. Now that you know this, how do you think a global company might strategically choose where to hold its board meetings? It's a decision that could literally be worth millions. Thanks for joining us.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dorae Shelf.